Announced today, new criteria will be introduced for those facing criminal charges but cannot afford a lawyer.
Actor Terence is charged with flouting COVID-19 rules at a birthday party attended by 13 people.
And after more than 3 decades as an arts centre, the final curtain will come down on the substation in July. Welcome to The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay.
I'm Haryanto Diman. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
New criteria for those seeking help under the Criminal Legal Aid Scheme or CLAS will be introduced this year.
Applicants will be assessed on their per capita household income, annual value of their place of residence and the amount of savings and non-CPF investments.
Speaking during the debate on the Law Ministry's budget, Second Minister for Law Edwin Tong said these changes will mirror the eligibility criteria for civil legal aid, which was updated last October.
We introduced new means test criteria for civil legal aid in October 2019, as I mentioned, aligned with those commonly used in social support schemes, namely per capita household, annual value, and the applicant's savings and non-CPF investments. This year, we will extend the new means test criteria for CLAS as well. There will be no material impact on the overall households eligible. We will maintain it at 25%. There will be no drop. But the changes will simplify the application process and also reduce the paperwork for applicants.
Well, Mr. Tong noted there is room for flexibility in deciding whether legal aid applicants with exceptional circumstances can still qualify for help. There will be a set of rules allowing officers to exercise discretion in assessing applications.
For example, if an applicant has a severe disability or illness, the assessment can exclude some of the applicant's savings in deciding their eligibility.
Well, giving an update on the ministry's COVID-19 support measures, Mr. Tong said more than 8,600 people and businesses have requested temporary relief from their contractual obligations.
This as of last Tuesday under the COVID-19 Temporary Measures Act. 66% were related to hire purchase agreements for commercial equipment or vehicles and rental of commercial and industrial property.
Meanwhile, about 117,000 notices of cash grants totaling $947 million have been issued to property owners with tenants who were eligible for rental relief also as of last Tuesday.
During the debate on the Trade and Industry Ministry's budget today, Minister Chan Chun Sing said Singapore will strengthen its status as a global business and technology hub in order to ensure a sustainable recovery out of the COVID-19 crisis.
He highlighted 3 strategies: strengthening our position as a global hub for business and technology, entrenching ourselves as a critical node in global value chains that make us hard to displace, and building real and unique capabilities in our enterprises and workers so they can compete in a more globalized world.
To stay competitive and relevant amid the disruptions, Mr. Chan also said Singapore will need to create an environment where it can distinguish itself.
We are not returning to a pre-COVID world. Even if our GDP returns to a pre-COVID levels quantitatively, we will have a qualitatively different economy then. The share of sector and industries will be different. The type of products and services that we produce and trade with the world will be different. The skill sets of our people required to make a living will be different. We must start now to build this new economy. We must be a safe harbor for capital, talent, and ideas in an uncertain world. We must be connected, trusted, and resilient as a node, both physically and virtually, in order to serve different markets in a bifurcating and fragmenting world. We need to embrace technology, especially digital technology, to be the disruptor and not be the disrupted. We need to master digitalization to transcend the constraints of our size and geographical location, where mastery of data can lead to increasing returns to scale.
Mr. Chan also said Singapore will need progressive rules to enable new business models to thrive, as well as entrench critical parts of the R&D value chains to incentivize businesses to include Singapore in their global innovation networks, even in times of crisis.
These are the reasons why we are investing heavily in the development of our local talent, the attraction of global talent to complement and reinforce our local talent pool. This is also why we are aggressively strengthening our physical trade and digital connectivity, including expanding our network of free trade agreements and the new generation of digital economy agreements and partnerships. This is also why we have spent and will continue to spend on our R&D, from basic research to translational research for commercialization. And this is also why we have heard from MinLaw that we will continue to strengthen our IP regime from valuation to arbitration and assessment, so that we provide a complete ecosystem for businesses wanting to put their IP in Singapore. We must get all these enablers right to strengthen our position as a global business hub. With all these enablers in place, we are confident that our reputation as a trusted and efficient place to do business will distinguish us from the competition.
22 applications for the Tech Pass have been approved since the scheme was launched in mid-January. Disclosing this figure in Parliament, Minister of State for Trade and Industry Alvin Tan said that given the dynamism of the tech sector, the government will have to monitor how the Tech Pass is working and adjust accordingly.
The new Work Pass scheme opened with 500 places available and is aimed at attracting foreign tech industry experts to Singapore. These professionals would have a track record of either founding or leading sizable tech companies and in the development of widely adopted tech products.
Meanwhile, the other two workers who died in last Wednesday's Tuas industrial fire have been identified by non-profit organisation It's Raining Raincoats.
They were 29-year-old Ani Suzaman Muhammad and 23-year-old Shohel Muhammad. Both were from Bangladesh.
According to It's Raining Raincoats' Facebook post, Ani had been in Singapore for about 17 months and was the breadwinner for the family. He had taken a loan to come to Singapore and still has quite a sum to pay off.
It's Raining Raincoat said Shohel was a young man excited to start life as a migrant worker in Singapore. He had just turned 23 years old last month and was the second of 5 siblings.
The third worker, who was earlier identified, was Site Supervisor Mari Mutu S. And a fundraising initiative for the 3 victims has raised about $395,000 as at 5 p.m. today. It's Raining Raincoats said that it will be dividing the proceeds equally among their families. The campaign is expected to run until noon tomorrow.
The Straits Times' investigative team recently tackled what it called the migrant burden for Singapore's foreign workers. For years, work permit and S-Pass holders in industries like construction have been illegally subject to high recruitment costs by employment agencies and labour brokers.
Correspondent Yuan Sin was part of the team investigating this. She's here to share more. Yuan Sin, for context, could you briefly tell us about the recruitment process for migrant workers?
Yes, hi Haryanto. Well, the process for recruiting migrant workers is actually very complicated. For workers who come from South Asia countries like India and Bangladesh, they may rely on a whole chain of middlemen from people they know in their home country, and there may also be agents and middlemen here in Singapore. Because the reason is that nobody really knows where they can find these jobs because they are not publicly kind of advertised on any platforms, right? And this may involve legal agents. And in Singapore, we have strict laws to ensure that workers are only paying licensed agents recruitment fees. So this is capped at 2 months of their salary. But what happens is that you end up having a whole chain of illegal agents, whether abroad or here in Singapore, who try to bypass all these laws and rules, right? And they end up paying a lot more money than what they're supposed to pay. So sometimes up to 10 or 20 times their salary, which could be $10,000 or $20,000.
Wow, okay, but Yunsin, this problem, it isn't new at all. There are several measures to weed out such practices over the years, including imposing stiffer penalties and stepping up education efforts. But why and how, I guess, are these illegalities still happening despite the enforcement regime?
I think one key problem is the fact that it is very hard to prove cases of wrongdoing and to also detect them, right? So some of the workers that we interviewed in this video, John and Hussein, his name has been redacted for his own privacy reasons. So they paid their employers or workers that they knew some money, right? But the worker may ask for the money in cash, and they are very savvy because they know that what they're doing is wrong. So they wouldn't have receipts. They will not be texting about the transactions. Instead, they will be calling about the transactions, or they may also be relying on other middlemen to pass messages, right? So by the time the cash is handed over and the worker realizes that what just happened is wrong, when they go to the authorities, it may be very difficult to prove these cases. And even for John, the worker that we interviewed in this case, while he had some transaction, some evidence of the fact that he had made payment to his employer, the last we heard from the authorities and from John is that his case is probably closed, which probably means that there will not be further prosecution for such a case. So it's quite difficult for these workers because it's very hard for them to find closure, even in cases where there have been cases of suspected wrongdoing.
Yunsin, what were you and the investigative team hoping to achieve by bringing this issue to light?
Yes, Haryanto, this has been a long-standing problem. So I think what we're trying to achieve is to understand how we can best solve this problem at its root. Because this actually leads to a lot of consequences for the workers as well as employers, and it's also bad for Singapore in the long run. So imagine if you're a worker who owes $10,000 or $20,000 the moment you arrive in Singapore, you could also be facing a lot of debt, and when that happens, you end up becoming vulnerable, right? Because imagine if you're in a bad working situation, because you need the money so much to repay the debt that you've already incurred, that you've already chalked up, right, before coming to Singapore. This would mean that you find it difficult to leave these bad working conditions, right? And I guess by talking to the various organizations and the workers, we're also trying to see if there could be kind of systemic change or structural solutions that can be taken to address the problem at its root, so that workers may not have to face such high consequences, or they do not have to pay such high fees again.
Well, Yunsin, then are there any practical or feasible solutions to end this migrant burden problem once and for all?
Yeah, so I think one of the solutions that was put forth by some of the experts that we interviewed that would involve improving transparency in the job market, right? So imagine for John or Hussein, the workers that we interviewed, if there was a centralized portal that they can go to look up jobs and where transactions can be conducted over this portal, it will also mean that they do not have to rely on middlemen or agents to find out where the jobs are, and they wouldn't be so desperate to land a job because they know that there are open and easily accessible portals where they can look for these jobs. And I think some employers or other people will be concerned that workers may not have enough IT literacy, or they may not know how to access these portals, and employment agents may also be worried that that they are going to be cut out of this whole recruitment chain, right? But I think what I see is that there's actually a place for both employment agents to have a stake in this process as well. So for instance, there could be the government may kind of appoint a dedicated employment agent to do all the processing, but because the agent is tied to the portal, it would mean that you have less of this agents who may abuse the system, or people who go under the radar and charge workers high fees. And I think workers may also, those who do not know how to use such a portal, they can also get help from their respective embassies back home who can help them to fill in the paperwork. So that's one possible solution. I think another possible solution that TWC2 and NGO has also advocated for would be to have some processes in place to help workers who are already here in Singapore find jobs. So those, maybe their contracts have ended, typically they'll be sent home immediately, right? But then this will also mean that to come back to Singapore, they'll have to go through the whole process again and pay like lots of fees against to agents. But if they're already here in Singapore, maybe they can be rematched to another company here that needs workers. And this is already happening now, right? Because of the pandemic, lots of companies are missing workers. So this can also help to solve the manpower shortage situation that we have.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Yuan Sin, to share more on this topic that really does sound like it needs some addressing. We've been speaking to our colleague, correspondent Yuan Sin, and you can watch the Migrant Burden episode on the Straits Times' Facebook and YouTube channels.
An update on the COVID-19 situation here. 8 new cases were confirmed today, all imported.
They had already been placed on stay-home notice when they arrived in Singapore. More details will be released later tonight.
Veteran actor Terence Chow and a man identified as Lance Lim were charged today with allegedly breaching safe distancing rules. Their cases are adjourned to April 27th. Both are accused of breaching Phase 2 regulations that restricted social gatherings to no more than 5 people at fellow actor Jeffrey Shu's birthday party last year. 13 people in all attended the party at the Daisy Road condominium. Now, according to media reports, Chow is the owner of the unit. Meanwhile, Lim is said to have invited 3 visitors, despite knowing these would breach the maximum number allowed. The 11 others have already been fined $300 each.
AirAsia Food is officially in Singapore, and in conjunction with the launch, the Malaysian Airlines food delivery service is offering unlimited free delivery for 2 weeks from today to March the 16th. This applies for deliveries within 8 kilometers from the order point.
Well, say goodbye to the substation as it will close for good when it leaves its space at 45 Armenian Street after 3 decades. It's scheduled to move out for renovations in July. The National Arts Council has said that the substation can return to the venue as a tenant under the Framework for Arts Spaces scheme, but that the space will be shared with other arts groups.
Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Kwe. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.